At 6:41 a.m. Eastern Ukraine, a Russian fighter jet slid into contested airspace at high altitude, cruising at a speed its pilot believed was untouchable. Inside the cockpit, the radar warning receiver stayed silent. No missile launch, no lock-on tone. To the pilot, this was routine, another calculated challenge to Western-supplied air defenses, another flight meant to prove that Russian air power could still operate freely. But 90 kilometers away, a Patriot battery was awake. For less than 10 seconds, its radar flickered on, just long enough. The jet never knew it had been measured. Its speed, altitude, flight profile, and electronic signature were quietly recorded, processed, and shared. Then the radar went dark again. No launch, no explosion, no headline, at least not yet. The Russian jet turned away. Mission successful, unaware that something far more dangerous than a missile had just happened. In trying to test the Patriot system, the pilot had done exactly the opposite. He had revealed himself. Because in modern air warfare, the biggest mistake is not getting shot down. It is believing you were never seen. To understand why this flight mattered, it is necessary to step back and examine how Russian air power has operated since the start of the war. From the first days of the invasion, Russia expected its air force to dominate Ukrainian skies. On paper, it possessed numerical superiority, longer-range missiles, and advanced fighter aircraft designed to suppress enemy air defenses. Yet months into the conflict, air superiority never truly materialized. Instead, Russian pilots adopted a cautious doctrine. They flew near the edge of Ukrainian airspace, launched standoff weapons, and relied heavily on electronic warfare pods to blind older Soviet-era systems such as S-300 variants. These tactics worked reasonably well against legacy air defenses with predictable radar behavior. Fighters could probe, observe radar reactions, and retreat with limited risk. Over time, patterns emerged, and Russian planners believed they understood the rules of the game. That assumption collapsed with the arrival of the Patriot system. Unlike earlier systems, Patriot was not designed merely to shoot aircraft down. It was built to control airspace through detection tracking and data fusion. Operated with Western doctrine, it does not behave like a constantly emitting radar beacon waiting to be targeted. Instead, it functions as part of a wider intelligence and air defense network supported by satellite queuing and real-time data sharing with partners such as NATO. From a strategic perspective, Russia faced a dilemma. Ignoring Patriot meant conceding freedom of action in critical air corridors. Challenging it, however, meant exposing pilots and aircraft to a system specifically designed to learn from such encounters. Russian command chose the latter, believing brief, controlled flights could extract useful intelligence without triggering a response. This belief underestimated the shift in warfare. Patriot did not need to fire to win. The mere act of approaching it allowed Ukrainian operators to study Russian flight profiles, electronic emissions, and behavioral patterns. In strategic terms, Russia was no longer testing a passive defense. It was feeding data into a system optimized to adapt. The moment Russian jets treated Patriot like older defenses, they made a fundamental miscalculation, one that would quietly reshape air operations across the front. Long before the Russian jet crossed into contested airspace, both sides were already engaged in a quieter battle. One fought with sensors, algorithms, and anticipation rather than missiles. For Russian planners, these probing flights were carefully rehearsed. Aircraft such as the Su-35S and MiG-31 were equipped with advanced radar warning receivers, electronic countermeasure pods, and data links intended to detect hostile radar activity and immediately signal danger. Pilots were trained to operate just outside known engagement envelopes, trusting their instruments more than instinct. What they did not see was the preparation on the ground. Ukrainian Patriot crews operated under strict emission control. Radar operators were instructed to remain dark for extended periods, relying instead on off-board cueing from a broader intelligence picture. Satellite tracking airborne early warning data shared by partners and passive sensors provided enough information to predict when Russian aircraft would appear. By the time the jet approached, the Patriot battery already knew where to look. Inside the command vehicle, the decision-making window was measured in seconds. Operators waited for the precise moment when the aircraft's flight path, altitude, and speed aligned to produce the clearest possible radar return. The radar was not activated to threaten or intimidate, but to harvest data. In those brief seconds, the system captured the jet's radar cross-section behavior, electronic emissions, and maneuvering response, or lack of it. For the Russian pilot, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. No warning tone meant no immediate threat. From his perspective, the mission confirmed what doctrine suggested Patriot was present but hesitant. From the Ukrainian side, the outcome was very different. The system had confirmed assumptions, validated tracking models, and refined engagement parameters without revealing its full capabilities. This asymmetry defined the intelligence battle. One side believed it was observing, the other was learning. And in modern air warfare, the side that learns faster does not need to fire first. It only needs to wait for the next mistake. At 6:01 a.m., the Russian fighter began its run exactly as planned. The aircraft held a steady altitude well above the range where older Ukrainian systems had proven dangerous in the past. Speed was controlled, not aggressive, chosen to minimize infrared signature spikes and reduce the likelihood of triggering defensive reactions. To the pilot, this was a textbook challenge flight close enough to test, far enough to retreat. Inside the cockpit, the instruments reinforced that confidence. The radar warning receiver showed no continuous wave illumination, no spike indicating a fire control radar, no launch cue. The aircraft's electronic warfare suite remained on standby, conserving power and avoiding unnecessary emissions that might give away its own signature. Everything suggested the Patriot battery was either inactive or unwilling to engage. What the pilot could not see was how carefully the situation had been engineered. As the jet crossed an invisible line, the Patriot crew initiated a short, deliberate sequence. The radar powered up at a reduced duty cycle, scanning a narrow volume of airspace rather than broadcasting widely. This was not a full tracking mode meant to guide a missile. It was a surgical observation window timed to coincide with the jet's most revealing flight phase. For several seconds, the system watched. It measured how the aircraft's radar cross-section changed with slight heading adjustments. It recorded how the jet maintained course when no warning tone sounded, revealing assumptions baked into Russian training. It noted the absence of evasive maneuvers, no notching, no sudden altitude change, no deployment of countermeasures. This was critical. It confirmed that the pilot believed he was outside a lethal envelope. Then the Patriot radar went dark again. From the cockpit, nothing had changed. The Russian jet completed its arc, turned away, and accelerated back toward friendly airspace. The mission appeared uneventful. Another data point collected, another system challenged without consequence. In post-flight debriefs, this sortie would likely be logged as confirmation that Patriot, while present, was being used cautiously. On the ground, the interpretation was the opposite. The brief radar activation had been enough to validate tracking accuracy and timing. Operators now knew exactly how long the jet remained exposed before reacting, and more importantly, how long it did not react. That window mattered. It defined how much time a future interceptor would have, and how little warning the pilot would receive once the system shifted from observation to engagement. This was the moment the mistake became irreversible. By flying a predictable profile and relying solely on warning systems to signal danger, the pilot had revealed a dependency. Patriot was not forced to fight on the pilot's terms. Instead, it learned how the pilot behaved when he believed he was safe. In modern air defense, that knowledge is more valuable than a single shootdown. Within days, Russian flight patterns in the area subtly changed. Altitudes shifted, distances increased. The confidence to approach freely was gone. No public announcement explained why, but the reason was simple. The challenge flight had succeeded only on the surface. In reality, it had handed the defender exactly what it needed: proof that the jet could be seen, measured, and when the time came, stopped. In the hours and days that followed, Patriot did not respond with missiles. Instead, it responded by reshaping the battle space. This was the system's true defensive function, not destruction, but deterrence through uncertainty. By remaining mostly silent, Patriot denied Russian pilots the feedback they depended on to feel safe. No warning tones meant nothing anymore. Silence became a threat. Russian command quickly recognized the problem. Flights that once approached confidently now carried invisible risk. Pilots could no longer be sure whether Patriot was watching, tracking, or preparing to engage. The absence of launches did not signal weakness. It signaled discipline. Every second the radar stayed dark increased doubt inside the cockpit. As a result, behavior changed. Jets began flying farther from known Patriot coverage. Altitudes were adjusted to reduce exposure windows. Weapon release points shifted deeper into standoff ranges, trading accuracy for safety. These adaptations were defensive reactions to a system that had never fired a shot yet had already imposed costs. Fuel consumption increased, sortie effectiveness dropped, tactical freedom narrowed. From a defensive standpoint, this was success. Patriot had forced Russian aviation to operate on its terms. Instead of challenging air defenses directly, pilots were now planning routes around them. The sky was no longer contested through explosions, but through hesitation. This response highlighted a crucial misunderstanding in Russian doctrine. Air defenses were treated as obstacles to be triggered and avoided. Patriot functioned differently. It acted as a silent referee, setting boundaries and punishing overconfidence, not immediately, but inevitably. The Russian jet had not survived because it was untouchable. It had survived because Patriot chose not to touch it yet. And that distinction changed everything about how Russian aircraft would fly from that moment forward. The Russian pilot's error was not a lack of skill nor a failure of courage. It was a technical misjudgment rooted in outdated assumptions about how modern air defense systems operate. For decades, pilots were trained to equate danger with illumination. If a fire control radar locked on, alarm sounded. If no warning appeared, the aircraft was presumed safe. Patriot was designed specifically to break that logic. At the core of the system is its ability to separate detection from engagement. The Patriot air defense system does not rely on continuous emissions that announce its presence. Its radar can operate in brief, low probability of intercept modes, activating only long enough to collect data before disappearing again. To a radar warning receiver, this looks like noise or nothing at all. Russian pilots trusted their onboard sensors to define the threat environment. That trust was misplaced. Radar warning receivers are optimized to detect sustained or high-energy emissions, not short, disciplined bursts designed to avoid classification. When the Patriot radar activated momentarily, it fell below the threshold that would trigger a meaningful response in the cockpit. The pilot interpreted silence as safety. Another mistake lay in flight profile predictability. By maintaining steady altitude speed and heading, the jet presented an ideal target for analysis. Even without launching an interceptor, Patriot operators could model engagement timelines, calculate intercept geometries, and identify the exact moment a missile would have been lethal. The pilot unknowingly flew the simulation for them. Electronic countermeasures offered no protection because none were deployed. There was no need, the pilot believed, without a confirmed lock. This revealed a doctrinal gap. Russian tactics assumed that threat confirmation precedes danger. Patriot exploited the opposite reality. Danger exists long before confirmation. The final technical failure was psychological. Confidence in technology replaced tactical caution. The pilot flew as if surviving the sortie proved immunity. In fact, survival only confirmed exposure. Patriot did not need to win the engagement that day, it needed to understand it. In modern air warfare, the first side to be understood is the first side to lose freedom of action. The Russian jet did not escape because it was beyond reach. It escaped because the defender was patient enough to let it go after learning everything it needed. The consequences of that single challenge flight extended far beyond one pilot or one Patriot battery. In the days that followed, Russian air activity in the sector changed in subtle but measurable ways. Aircraft that had once approached confidently now kept greater distance. Flight paths became less direct. Weapon releases shifted farther from the front, reducing precision and increasing reliance on unguided or standoff munitions. This adjustment revealed a strategic truth. Patriot did not need to eliminate Russian aircraft to be effective. By forcing pilots to respect its presence, it reduced the operational value of Russian air power. Each additional kilometer of standoff range translated into lower accuracy, longer response times, and diminished battlefield impact. Air power, once a tool of initiative, became reactive. At a higher level, this altered campaign planning. Russian commanders were compelled to allocate more resources to suppression and avoidance rather than offense. Electronic warfare assets were repositioned. More aircraft were tied up in escort and support roles. The cost was not measured in losses, but in opportunity. Every mission constrained by Patriot was a mission that could not be flown freely elsewhere. For Ukraine and its partners, the lesson was equally significant. A limited number of advanced systems operated with discipline could impose disproportionate strategic effects. Patriot became less a shield and more a lever, one that shifted enemy behavior without revealing its full capabilities. Internationally, the encounter reinforced a broader trend in modern warfare. Control of the air is no longer achieved solely through numbers or firepower. It is achieved through information dominance, patience, and the ability to force an adversary into caution. The Russian jet's challenge was meant to assert presence. Instead, it demonstrated vulnerability. What followed was not a dramatic shootdown, but something more enduring. A redefined airspace where confidence had been replaced by restraint and where the silent influence of a single system shaped every decision above the battlefield. The encounter between the Russian jet and the Patriot system never produced flames in the sky or wreckage on the ground, yet its outcome was decisive. It demonstrated a shift in how air warfare is won, not through dramatic destruction, but through controlled discipline and understanding the opponent better than they understand you. The pilot believed the absence of a warning meant safety. He believed survival equaled success. Both assumptions were wrong. Patriot proved that in modern combat, visibility is vulnerability and confidence can be exploited. The system did not need to fire to impose limits. It only needed to watch, learn, and wait. This episode underscores a broader transformation in military thinking. Advanced air defenses are no longer passive barriers to be breached. They are active participants in shaping behavior. By forcing an adversary to alter routes, altitudes, and tactics, they extract a strategic price that accumulates over time. Every adjustment narrows options. Every hesitation slows momentum. For Russia, the lesson was costly but clear. Challenging a modern Western air defense system as if it were a legacy threat revealed not strength but complacency. The mistake was not tactical bravery, it was conceptual rigidity. Doctrine failed to keep pace with technology. For observers, the message is equally important. The future of air warfare will belong to those who can deny freedom without revealing intent, who can win engagements without firing, and who understand that data can be more decisive than missiles. In that sense, the Patriot system did exactly what it was designed to do. The Russian jet flew away intact, but from that moment on, it never flew the same way again. Bye for now.